So, we're in this series that we're calling This Is Home because if you haven't been with us the last couple of weeks, this summer we took a massive step toward this church being permanent for us. And I explained all of that in the first week, and I'm not going to go through all of it again this morning. But if you weren't here and you want to know more about that, you can check it out online. Or you could come to Ignite next week, and we'll go into it in detail and answer questions and all of that. But as we settle into this space, being our permanent home, we started this series with an important question. Like, what's the point? What's the point to all this? Why do we do church? Like, so we have a building, so we can do church. Like, so what? Why does any of this matter? What's the point? And our leadership over the last several years has discussed this and really boiled it down to a two-word statement. Ultimately, we want everything to be about what? Love lived. It's that simple. We want it to be about love lived. Jesus was once asked, what is the most important commandment? And it's interesting that because he didn't say when he was asked that question, well, you can't boil it down to one thing. Read it all matters. Do all of it, which he certainly believed. But he was like, you can't, it's, he wasn't in a place where he's like, you can't really elevate one commandment over all the others. He didn't do that. He answered the question and he said this. He said, okay, here's the greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And then he said, and the second is like it. So he's like, you asked me for one, here's two. Giving you a bonus. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then he said something incredible. He said, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. He was saying everything in the sacred scripture can be summed up by, it all hangs on these two commandments. Love God and love people. Because that's the ultimate thing. That's what it's all about. Love is the most beautiful and the most powerful thing. And so at Brookview, as we've kind of wrestled through the years of what this means for us, we've landed in more recent years on us living love in three directions. We've said we want to be about love lived up toward our Father, in toward one another, and out toward the world around us. And when we think about what a church is supposed to be, the reality is if we neglect any one of these, up, in, or out, then we're missing something vital. And so we've been talking about each of these 1 week at a time. And last week we looked at love lived up toward our Father. Today is about love lived in toward one another. And to get us into this, I want to revisit something that we have talked about before. I want to start with a simple question. What makes you happy? What makes you happy? And I think that's one of the most basic of all human questions. But by the end of your life, the way that you've answered that question will determine for you how you've spent your life. Now, some of you know what makes you happy. You do. You've figured it out and you've experienced it, but what happens is sometimes you forget. And so it's good to come back to this question from time to time. For others of you, to be honest, you have no idea what makes you happy. And here's how you can tell. You aren't happy. You aren't happy. Because really, you have no idea. You have not discovered what it is that makes you happy. And so I just want to throw this out there. If you keep trying to be happy and you aren't happy, it might just be that you haven't figured out what it is that makes you happy. So at the risk of sounding insanely presumptuous, today I'm going to tell you what makes you happy. And if you're listen, V-neck sweater pastor dude, you don't even know me. You don't know anything about me. I would say, well, that's totally true. There are several of you that I don't know all that well. But before you just write me off on this, I just want to ask you to listen to what I have to say. And then if you disagree at the end, feel free, quietly to yourself, to disagree. But what makes you happy? What makes you happy? And here's something that I think most of us who have spent long periods of our life being happy have discovered. Happiness is more about who than what. It's more about who than what. And this is, I think, one of the lessons that we learned very early in life. Most of us learned it in the backyard, right? Because at some point, you were a little kid, right? And you're playing in the dirt in the backyard, and all you've got is like a rock and a stick. But it didn't really matter what you had, as long as there were some other who's in the backyard with you that were important to you. Mom, dad, brother, sister, friends from the neighborhood. If the who's were there, the what became far less significant. And then you went to elementary school, and if you found your little group of who's, it didn't really matter what you had. And then you went to middle school and high school, and it didn't matter what you had as long as you were included in the right group of who's. I mean, at its core, happiness is about relational connectedness. It is. And when you think about it, if happiness was really about a what, we could all just go out and find that thing, our happy what, right? And we'd like have that thing and just be happy all the time. And it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter to me how you treated me. It wouldn't matter if you included me. It wouldn't matter if you liked me. It wouldn't matter if you respected me. None of that would matter. Because I could just keep going back to my happy what. Or maybe you think about it in this way. In the end, okay, thinking about the end of your life, in the end, you will want certain people by your side. You will want people by your side. When people are laying in a bed in their final days, whether it's in a hospital or in hospice care or at home, or they don't grab, like, honey, okay, one last thing. I need you to bring me my truck. I just need to get one last moment with my truck. Okay, because in the end, it's not about a car. It's not about a truck. It's not about a gun collection. It's not about shoes or a purse. It's not about a yard or a garden. It's not about the right house. It's not about the perfect bathroom, right? Not about the beautiful kitchen. It's always about a who. It's always about a who. A best friend, a child, a grandchild. In those last days, it's always about a who. Your spouse. It's one more time with your brother, one more time with your sister, one more time with your mom or your dad, a neighbor that's been good to you. In the end, happiness is more about who than what. And I've discovered that we can actually take this one step further. Here's something else. As long as you are all about you, you won't be happy. The more you're about you, the less happy you'll be. Because here's the thing. The more you focus on you, the less you focus on the yous around you. In fact, if you were able to get yourself exactly right and all the things in your life just right, you were the right size, right, and the right shape, and you had the right income and the right car, and you lived in the right neighborhood in the right house, if you actually got you exactly the way you want to be, it still won't make you happy. And this is not the way we usually see it in our culture, because we're trained. We are taught to think, if I could just get certain things, if I could just have certain things, if I could just live a certain way, have a certain level of health, have a certain look, I'd be happy. But the truth is, you cannot consume, acquire, or exercise your way to happiness. In fact, if you obsess over any of those things, you'll end up less happy. And here's why. Because at those things at their core are you being all about you. And there's been a ton of research on this. And we've looked at this before. But here's what the research says time and time again. It says you cannot consume, acquire, or exercise your way to happiness, but you can serve and volunteer your way there. Like all over the world in different cultures, researchers have asked, is there a connection between happiness and selflessness? Okay, is there a connection between health and selflessness? Is there a connection between health and happiness and volunteering and serving? And we've talked about this. But researchers keep discovering the same thing. It turns out there is a powerful link between health, happiness, and people's willingness to serve and live selflessly. University of Chicago did a study asking, what are the most fulfilling careers? You ever wondered that? Like, what are the most fulfilling careers? And they made a list, and I'm going to show you what they came up with. They put, like, certain jobs, they put them into categories, into broader categories. But here's what they came up with. Here are the most satisfying jobs, according to the University of Chicago. Number 1, jobs where you're caring for others. Number 2, teaching others. Number 3, protecting others. What's the common denominator in all of these? Others. Right. And then the last one is creative pursuits. And I just wanted to put that in there to be honest, so that I'm not getting shifty with the facts. Doesn't help my argument at all. So if you want to be like fourth best happy, then do some sort of creative pursuit. Yeah. But it turns out that careers that are fundamentally about other people lead to the highest levels of career satisfaction. They also discovered that there is no income level associated with career satisfaction. There is no income level associated with career satisfaction at once somebody gets to a certain point. So once a person has reached a level of income where they can eat and pay the bills and basically like live indoors, higher levels of income did not equate to higher levels of happiness. Now, there was more research done in the UK. They looked at 40 different studies that asked the question, is there a connection between happiness and selflessness, between happiness, health, and serving other people? They looked at 40 studies that had been conducted over 20 years, and they discovered some extraordinary links between volunteering, health, and happiness. Now, this isn't like, by the way, this is not people who like volunteered one time 10 years ago, right? This is people who like carve out time regularly to volunteer and to serve. Could be in the community, could be in their school systems, could be in a church, could be overseas, doing volunteer work overseas, could be any of that, but it's something that is somewhat regular. And here's what they found about links between volunteering, health, and happiness. They found that people who are engaged in it regularly experience less depression, less heart disease, lower stress, less drug abuse, and there's less unplanned pregnancy. How about that? And as you might expect, like for teenagers who learn to be selfless and volunteer and engage in stuff, there's far less drug abuse and far less unplanned pregnancy. But this is kind of unexpected. They discovered that even if you have to force your teenager to volunteer somewhere, you should, because they found that volunteering with a bad attitude still yields positive results. And here's some other interesting links. They found that when it comes to volunteering, health, and happiness, people who volunteer report better psychological well-being, better physical health, higher self-esteem, greater life expectancy, and a higher quality of life. So weird. And this is just like a small sample of mountains of research out there. And I invite you to look into this for yourself. Get online, not right now, but get online and look into this. But to summarize, I think here's what we could say. We could say one of the best things you can do for yourself is not focus so much on yourself. Now, because the research on this is so overwhelming, it encourages scientists and researchers to come up with theories, right? This is what scientists and researchers do. They come up with theories, and they want to know why is it that self-absorbed people struggle emotionally and physically, while selfless, other-centered people thrive. And it turns out that if you're in the science world, most of the theories are like evolutionary theories, right? They're evolutionary theories. And I saw one that said that this is the evolutionary theory for why men tend to be selfless. Men are positively rewarded for selflessness because women find it sexy. that it's actually all linked to the mating ritual. And so I saw that and I was like, okay, that explains why Jen is so powerfully drawn to me. She is just turned on by my selflessness. She can't help it. It's all just a part of her evolutionary development. So you have all these theories that are based on evolution and all these attempts to explain why selfless people are happier. But I'm wondering if there might just be a simpler explanation. Could it simply be that you and I have been designed this way by God? That God has designed you so that if you want to be filled up, you have to learn or you have to find a way to pour yourself out. And what all this research does is it just confirms what Jesus followers have always known, that when you pour yourself out, somehow you get filled up. And that's why the New Testament is just filled with all of these commands, these one another commands, like love one another, care for one another, serve one another, forgive one another, carry one another's burdens. See, if like we actually learn to live this stuff, somehow we find ourselves filled. Now, I want to steer this back to a conversation about our church. We exist to live love, and that includes in toward one another. Now, church is not supposed to be a building that I go to, not primarily. It's not primarily supposed to be a service that I attend. Ultimately, a church is supposed to be, when it's working right, a family that I belong to. And when you look at the ancient description of the very first church, what you see is not a building. What you see is not a service that people attended. What you see is a family. And what an extraordinary family it was. And we're going to look at a description of it that was written by Luke, who was a Greek doctor who became a follower of Jesus. Now, Luke wrote the gospel that we call what? Luke. Nice. He also wrote a book. Does anybody else know what other book he wrote? Acts, which stands for Acts of the Apostles. Okay, ACTS, not AX. Acts of the Apostles, and it's all about what happened right after Jesus was gone. What happened in this movement after Jesus left? What did they do? And in Acts chapter 2, Luke gives us this description. And this is the first description, this is the first gathering of Christians that was ever described. And he says, here's what it was like. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and prayer. Now, at this point in the story, there are about 3,000 Christians in the entire world. And they're gathering in Jerusalem, and almost all of them are Jewish. And they have devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. And they're like, of course, they wanted to know about Jesus, what he taught, what he did, what it means. But right away, Luke describes something else. He says they also devoted themselves to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. In other words, they were deeply connected to one another. In the first century, connection happened most and it happened best around meals. So Luke says they were breaking bread together. They were eating meals together regularly, sharing that intimate, sacred space together. It's beautiful. And Luke goes on, he says, everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. So God's power on this blessing, power and blessing on this new community was just like obvious to everybody. Just as the authority of Jesus had been confirmed by miracles, the apostles' authority was accredited by God in the same way with miracles and these incredible signs. And Luke continues. It says, all the believers were together and had everything in common. Again, this was not about a building or a service. It was about community. And Luke describes what's happening. He says, they sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Okay, so when people in the community were in need, in serious need, those that had the ability provided for them and cared for them. Those that had property occasionally sold it, cashed it out to take care of the needs of others in the community. And you guys, you look at this and you go, okay, this is what Jesus had in mind. This is what Jesus had in mind. This is the kind of family he wanted. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And these people were poor. They were marginalized. Many of them were slaves or, just terrible. Life was hard. but they found love and joy in community together. And Luke says they enjoyed the favor of all the people. What does that mean exactly? I don't know, but it sounds beautiful to me. And Luke wraps up his description with this. He says, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Well, sure. This was the most gracious, most loving community of human beings that had ever existed on planet Earth. And people were drawn to it. This little community came to embody the inverse law of happiness. They'd come to discover that if you want to be filled up, you have to find a way to pour yourself out. And they lived it in every arena of their lives. But the real power for them was that they learned somehow to live it together. You know, when I met Jen, many of you know, I'd only been a follower of Jesus for like a year and a half, 2 years. Now she grew up in church, followed Jesus her whole life. She had a halo, actually. It was pretty sweet. But we got to know each other, and we were starting to date, and I just saw her live out her faith. And I realized, like, she did this whole thing totally differently from me. Like, I went to this big church, there's nothing wrong with big church, but I went to this big church because I really liked the preaching. I just loved learning, and this guy was a dynamic communicator. The music was It was like But there were lots of people my age, lots of people from Western Washington University that were there, lots of people my age that I wanted to be friends with. And so I loved the teaching, and I loved the friends, and like I tolerated the music. But Jen, when we started dating, she went to a different church. It was also a very large church, but she was like involved in all this stuff. Like she was involved in, like, okay, so she taught kids, you know, like on Sundays and on Wednesdays. And then she would like babysit those same kids for free. Like just offer it up. She'd watch those kids. She'd let their parents get a night out together or whatever they needed. And when those kids came over, she would like pour herself into them. She wouldn't like put on the Lion King and go, shut up. You know, she was like baking cookies with them and doing puzzles with them and playing games and teaching them to read and teaching them to tie their shoes and all of just like pouring into them. And sometimes she'd go to coffee with different ladies from the church, especially those from her little life group or her small group. And she would just ask them questions about their lives. Tell me about how you're doing. Just authentic interest in them and their lives. And she would pray for them and she would encourage them. But what became obvious to me, it was all about them. And then get this. This used to like floor me. It used to make me mad, actually. Like any time at church, we'd be at her church and they would say, hey, we could really use some help with whatever. And I'm like, oh, no. Because if she could, she would sign up and she would help, like almost every time. And so I'd be like, hey, Jen, want to watch a movie tonight? And she'd be like, I can't. Like, but want to come help me teach 4-year-olds? And I was like, no. Like, no. Okay, but if that's what I have to do to be with you, then okay, I guess. And pretty soon I'm like doing all this stuff with her. And after a while, I realized like, I love this. I like this. I ended up teaching 4-year-olds every Wednesday. And one time Jen was like gone and it was just me. And I'm looking at the kids and they're looking at me. I'm like, wow, this is happening. And those kids, man, every Wednesday night, those kids, they were awesome. I mean, it's just like amazing. Like if you've worked with kids, it is so. We had one kid comes in and is like, hey, sorry I'm late. My parents were playing in the bath. Again. Right? And then the parents come to pick the kid up and you're just like, hey, you guys look happy, you know? We had other kids in the class were like handing out snacks. We're like, hey, does anyone have any allergies? This one little kid, Gary, I still remember this. This was like 25 years ago. Gary's like, oh yeah, I got allergies. And Gary was one of those chubby, big, just chubby arms, chubby face kids, you know. He's like, yeah, I got allergies. He's like, I'm allergic to amoxicillin. And he's like, if I get amoxicillin, it makes me break out into, and he scrunched up his face. He's all like, makes me break out in a rash. Thanks, Gary. There's no amoxicillin in the animal crackers today. But Jen and I are still like, anytime we hear the word rash, we're both just like, rash. This morning, Melina walked in with Amara, her 5-year-old, and Amara was wearing this hat. And I was like, oh, this is so perfect. Can you guys read what it says there? It says love. And so I was like, oh, sweetheart, what does your hat say? And she's like, love. And I'm like, yes. And then she looks at me and her eyes start dancing. I'm like, something's about to happen. And she just goes, she just kind of smiles and goes, can you see that? Oh, yeah. Love. So, I mean, just we're with kids. I'm like, this is really fun, actually. This is totally fun. Jen, you be in charge, you make them behave, and I will enjoy them. It's going to be great. And when you're a guy, it's amazing how 4-year-old boys just naturally connect to you, right? I'm swarmed. I just sit down against the wall, and one of them brings me a Dr. Seuss book, and I've got like 4 or 5 little boys just sitting on my lap. I was like, you know what? This is actually pretty cool. I'm like dreading, initially I'm dreading going, and then I go, and I come away just filled. So I'm getting involved in doing all of this stuff with Jen, and I'm doing all this serving, and I'm watching her do all this serving and thinking about just the demands of all of it. And with her life being so consumed with all that, you know what Jen was like? She was bitter and angry all the time. She pretty much hated everyone. Well, it was amazing because she had all these commitments, and yet there was like this joy in her, this unshakable joy, and it just radiated, and it was mysterious to me. I'm like, what is happening? I've never seen anything like this. And when I was with her, the more I was with her, the more it started to rub off on me, because she had truly discovered the secret that happy people learn. If you want to be filled up, then find a way to pour yourself out. And it was the way that she was living in every arena of her life, every relationship, every context. She lived this everywhere. Like I said, she had a halo. It was amazing. But she lived this especially in church and in the church community. And to be honest with you guys, this is what drew me to her. This truly is what drew me to her. I was like, this chick there's something unique. And the more I spent time with her, the more she discipled me. Like not officially, not, just kind of organically discipled me. She showed me how to follow Jesus. Just like watching the way that she lived was an education. And I will tell you, no one has enabled me to grow more than she has. It's been just a life. That is awkward, and I'm so sorry. Okay, so a little while back, Jen and I were hanging out with some old college friends of mine from that era. In fact, one of them was my roommate, right from that same era when I first met her. And both of this married couple, both of them had been friends of mine, like independently, and then they fell in love and got married. Some of you watched some of that happen when you were in college. And so they invited us over a while back for dinner at their house, and my old friend, we're just talking about life, and he just kind of said, right now we're looking for a church. We haven't been very happy, and we're looking for a church, but I have this formula for evaluating churches. And he had this smug little smile, like his pastor friend is going to be super impressed with his formula. And so here's what he said. He's like, I have 3 criteria, and they are in this order. Number 1, how's the preaching? Right? The Word of God. Got to have the Word of God. Does it move me? Does it teach me? Does it inspire me? Does it tickle and challenge my intellect? Okay. Number 2, how's the worship? Right? How's the worship? Does it set my heart on fire? I need my heart set on fire. And then 3rd, how's the fellowship? Am I going to make good friends here? Are there people here like me that I can connect to? And it's amazing because here we are, years later, and I'm listening to my old friend, and as I'm hearing him talk, I am hearing a younger version of myself. I'm like, that was absolutely me. That's exactly how I used to think of church. I was such a consumer, like so self-absorbed in my approach. And I was just sort of taken back to my pre-gen way of looking at it and thinking about it, but she taught me to see it differently. She showed me a different way. And she taught me that if I want to be filled up, somehow I have to find a way, a meaningful way, to pour myself out. And here's what I have discovered over the years. The more self-absorbed I am, the shallower my experience becomes. And this is true in every arena. This is true in family life. If I'm self-absorbed when I'm with my family, it's a shallow experience. I've discovered it in marriage. I've discovered it in parenting. I've discovered that this is true in friendship. This is true when I coach basketball. If I make that experience all about me, it becomes really shallow in a hurry. The reality is this is true with anything that has to do with people. And this is especially true when it comes to church. The more it's about me, the shallower it is. This week, I was hanging out, Jen and I were having lunch, and she showed me this video. And Christian comedian guy that we like, his name is John Crist. How many of you have heard of John Crist? Yeah. And it's funny because he noticed something that I noticed a while back too, that if you look up a church online, attached to it will be a Google review. Is that weird? So apparently recently, this is brand new. It's like on Facebook is the only place you can find this. He couldn't remember what time church was in the morning, what they had switched their services or whatever, so he went to look it up, saw his church, and saw there were Google reviews for his church, and just like, that's ridiculous. So he goes on about a 4-minute rant about the absurdity of giving your church a Google review.
I just got on Google real quick to see what time church started tomorrow, to see what time to have to get up. Did you know that Google, churches have Google reviews? I can't stop looking at them. So, don't you love this Airbnb? It's just such like a Chip and Joe vibe in here. I love this shiplap. Just kidding, it's my parents' house. Anyway, I feel like I do like a considerable amount of roasting of church and Christian culture and things like that. But honestly, sometimes church needs to be defended because these reviews, I'm already mad. All right, I'm going to show you some of these. I'm going to try to screenshot it and these are actual real reviews from real people. I skip all the 5-star reviews. You know what I'm saying? I get it. We love this church. It's perfect. Saved my life. Let's go to the 1 stars.
Just got bored quick. Worship was not great, and the message was too monotone and screamy for me. Hey, you know what the opposite of monotone is? Screamy. These two words are the exact opposite. It's like saying, hey, turn the music down. I can't hear well. What?
Shout out to every pastor right now up Saturday night working on his message for the morning, working tirelessly. Because if I was a pastor and I saw my church's 1-star reviews, I'd be like, what's your address? I'm coming over right now. I only got 2 cheeks to turn. After that, it is on.
4 stars instead of 5 because there was no worship after this sermon. Hey, you know in China it's illegal to go to church? Yeah, and you gotta walk miles in secret. Yeah, no, tell us more though. Tell us more. The worship leader looked like he just got done mowing the yard. I've seen a lot of worship leaders in my day. I can't say the man's wrong. This is a review for a church called Church Without Walls. I was pretty disappointed when I got there and saw all kinds of walls. There was so many, very misleading name. Everything else was cool though. This guy gets it. The point of Google reviews, there is no point. Might as well make a joke.
I understand not choosing a mechanic or an Airbnb or something based on its rating. Who's not going to a church based on its Google rate? If you're doing, you know what? Don't come to my
daughter and I attended. Absolutely loved the service from baptism to communion. My family will be back. 1 star. Yeah, that's not how the star system works, Latasia. Come on. Not very welcoming. No one said hello or goodbye. This is actually good. This gets it. I gotta chill, dude. This gets. What do you want to play, Chubby Bunny? You need an icebreaker? We're not in middle school. Go shake somebody's hand. Introduce yourself. It's fine. We were not comfortable coming to the front and holding hands and giving outspoken prayer. Wait, people are still doing this? 3 stars is generous. That is the most uncomfortable. My name is John. That actually at 3 stars is, I had to do that one time at youth camp. Stand up, say my name, and an adjective that started with my first initial. It was 100% trauma. I was like, my name's John, I'm joyful. And then I, like, for sure, like, shot a kid at archery. I was not. Other people made fun of me, and they called me a Satianist for wanting to learn Latin. Did they, though? Also, learn Latin, learn English. Okay, that's too far. John Watt, I think this guy gets the point of, he understands the real meaning of church, you know? 1 star. Paninis were terrible. I'm gonna look at all these. Look at how far you've lasted in this story. I gotta go to bed. This is a rabbit hole. I can't keep going down. If you got a negative review at your church, please send it to me. I'd love to have a good laugh at it. Also, if you're Google reviewing a church, what? Honestly, I can't wait for some of y'all to go to heaven and run into someone from like the 1st century church. Oh, what are you up to? Oh, I gave my church 3 stars. I wasn't satisfied. Oh, tell me more. What happened last time I went to my church in Ephesus? Yeah, it was in the middle of worship and a bunch of Roman guards came in and arrested everyone for being Christian and took us to jail. No, tell us more about how the seats weren't cushioned properly.
Look, if you like want a really shallow church experience, then here's the formula. Be petty, be critical, self-absorbed. But just like anything else in life, the same law is in effect. If you want to be filled up, then you have to find a way to pour yourself out. Now, I'm about to get into some application for this message, and this is where I'm imagining some of you might get nervous. Because, so you've heard that there's a free lunch, the announcement that there's a free lunch after church. There is, and that's great, and you should go to that. There is also a ministry fair happening at that free lunch where you can see all the various ministries of Brookview, and if you want to volunteer and serve in something or get involved in some way, you can do that as well. And I know even bringing that up with a message like this, some of you are thinking, okay, is this where you like guilt me into serving? And first of all, let me say, you can serve in a ministry, you can serve in many ministries, and still be plagued by a self-absorbed attitude. That's not going to fix you. Like, you can. It isn't ultimately about, like, serving in a ministry. In fact, of all the things that make a church community strong, people serving in ministries is only a small part of it. So really, I'm talking about a pervasive attitude that we take with us everywhere. This is so much more than just sign up to be a volunteer. It's how we interact with people before church, after church, during the week. It's looking for ways to encourage people and connect with people. It's like asking ourselves, do I listen to people's stories and think, like, how can I love this person well? And for some of you, it might just be as simple as like inviting someone to go to lunch with you after church at some point. Like, that's not an official church ministry, but it might be a very impactful thing to do. Because it turns out, even in our culture, breaking bread still matters. Now, for some of you, it might be going into your life group this fall with a renewed mindset. It's not just, what am I going to get out of this? Instead, it's realizing that the group actually exists to give you a context to love and serve others. You have this opportunity there to get to know people and love them and figure out what their needs are. And you can do that well as long as you go into it looking for it. But you have to be looking and you have to be listening. And this is, to be honest with you, one of the reasons why I love being a part of this church so much. I feel like no church is perfect, but you guys embody this so well. You guys are always on the lookout for ways to love. And the more we do that, the more amazing this community can be together. Okay, so now we do have a ministry fair along with lunch. And for some of you, serving in some way might be a natural next step. And if so, I just would really encourage you to look at the various ministries and see if there's something that might be a really good fit for you. I do want to highlight two different ministries. The first is Kids Church. The reality is it takes about 50 volunteers to make Kids Church work. And if you're like, what? There's 50 volunteers over there? No, not all at the same time. Because we work on teams that rotate. And so it takes about 50 to make that healthy so that the rotation is enough where you don't have one or two people that are just back there week after week after week. Right now, they're about 10 people short. I think they need about 10 more volunteers. And some of you go, well, I can't teach kids the Bible, right? I'm not a theologian. I'm not a Bible scholar. Okay, you don't have to be. There's a curriculum, and it takes a passage and explains it for you, helps you figure out how you're going to teach kids, activities you can do with them, and it's super helpful. And then there's training for kids' church workers, okay? So you don't need to be a Bible scholar. And if you're sitting here going, would you really want me? Yes, we would, okay? There is a background check, and if you fail that, we don't want you. Do something else. There's a lot of other things you could do. The second ministry I want to highlight is the video ministry. So the sermons every Sunday get put up online afterwards for people to watch. And there used to be a team of 4 that did that, and it has dwindled down to really at one point it was just 1. And we have another that's helping with that. But 4 is about perfect. We need like 2 people that have enough technical savvy, which is not that much because you'll be trained to do it. But we need a couple more people that could help with that would be amazing. Now, let me bring this thing to a close. The main idea, if you hear nothing else, the main idea I want you to walk away with is this. The more self-absorbed you are, the shallower church will be. The more self-absorbed you are, the shallower church will be. And that's true of anything else in your life. Just like in family and marriage, parenting, friendship, the more self-absorbed you are, the shallower life will be. And church is no different. But I also want to say, I don't bring this up so that anyone feels guilty. In fact, if you're sitting here going, I feel like you're looking right at me in this message, I just want you to know, I am not looking at it specifically at anyone. I'm not trying to make anybody feel inadequate. And if that's what's happening for you and you're feeling defensive and kind of upset, I just want you to know that something's gone totally haywire. Okay, that's not what I want. I'm simply pointing out that the more you find ways to love and serve, the deeper your experience is going to be. And so I just encourage you to ask yourself, are there some opportunities for me to love and serve in deeper ways around here? Because this is what makes a church community beautiful. This is what gives it the real power. This is what gives it real depth. And I want to just kind of close with an example of why it is that this matters so much. Many of you know Tony and Rebecca Ellersick. You've known them. Many of you have known them for a long time. And you know that they gave birth to a beautiful little boy this summer. And that did not go as they were hoping. And he spent quite a while in the NICU, and it was scary, scary stuff, and it was touch and go. And in talking with them since then, they just expressed how big of a deal it is that they're a part of a church, a part of a family, not just a service they attend, but part of a family. And so I asked them if they would write down kind of what happened and why that's been a big deal for them. Man, what a cutie. And the baby's pretty cute too, Tony. So just the crush that I've had for years. So I'm going to read what they wrote, although I think that you will sense pretty quickly that this definitely has the feel of Rebecca. I think you will hear her voice in this. 6 weeks ago, our handsome little dude, Karsten Wild Ellersick, arrived earthbound in a rather unfortunate manner. The morning after a successful delivery, he started having unexpected seizures. A transfer to the Swedish First Hill NICU led to the discovery that Mr. Karsten had had a stroke during labor. We have since found out that there is a genetic mutation in him that can cause blood clots and strokes. Our little buddy has survived a stroke, 12 plus seizures, and one gnarly NICU stay. Long story short, our innocent little son was born into this world with something that we cannot fix, and it sucks. Are we allowed to be upset at God? Our son could have died. What the heck? It's probably fair to say that others would give us permission to be upset at God. However, our journey to save our son was met with a lot of discussion about where God has been in the midst of our lives, our marriage, and now the life of our new son. From the moment Tony and I truly fell in love with Jesus, we acknowledged that he has loved us more than we will ever fathom. He loved us patiently before we knew him. He loved us earnestly when our marriage was hanging on by a thread. And he has loved Karsten since before we even knew he existed. The interesting thing about believing in an invisible God, though, is that you can't see him directly showing his love. His love is often shown through something else. This love for us has continually been shown through people. More specifically, the love of God has been undeniably shown to us through our Brookview Village. Our entire walk with Jesus has been alongside our family right here in this church, and this new adventure we're on has been no exception. From the moment you all found out about our situation, you have continually lifted us up and have given us the strength to keep going. Whether it's providing meals, money, or simply "we love you" text messages, every one of these acts has led us back to remind us where God is in our lives. Because of the love shown to us, we've been able to posture ourselves into a state of surrender to God. We've been asked by non-believers how we've managed to keep our heads up in the midst of this chaos, and our response has always been God and our village. There is no doubt that God is truly shining through Brookview. With all that said, I wish that there were sufficient words to give to the church that equate to the amount of love we are continually given. But unfortunately, there isn't anything that can really be said to express the gratitude we have to you all. Please know, your acts of love and kindness are truly cherished by us. I will end this. See, it wasn't I. I will end this with a simple thank you. Thank you, Brookview Church, for constantly showing us what love lived truly looks like. And thank you, Jesus, for bringing Brookview Church into our lives. We love you, Tony, Rebecca, and Karsten Ellersick. You know why loving and serving matters? Because people matter. People matter. They matter more than anything else on earth. And so what is this whole thing all about? It's about love lived. See, being self-absorbed and critical, it was never the point. Like love lived, serving one another, caring for one another, encouraging one another, teaching one another, growing one another, protecting one another, providing for one another. That has always been the point. It's always been the point. On the night of the Last Supper, Jesus, after teaching on this topic over and over and over, came back to the importance of it one last time. And it says, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I've done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. And again, I think we could take his teaching right here and summarize it this way. If you want to be filled up, find a way to pour yourself out. And so I just want to pause here and wrap this thing up and say to you, if you're here this morning, and you like just in your life in general, you've been feeling pretty empty. If you struggle with bitterness, anger, jealousy, emptiness, and you're tempted to think, I guess what I need to do is focus more on me, you could not be more wrong. Because here's the deal. This is the secret that happy people learn. If you want to be happy, you have to find a way to pour yourself out, to give yourself away. You'll never ever be happy as long as it's all about you. And really, even if you get everything you're looking for, everything you're seeking, even if you get the income and the job and the house and the body and the car and all of the respect and all of the accolades, if it's all about you, you aren't going to be happy. You will always be empty. And so I invite you, think about the happiest people you know. Here's what I bet you find. Here's the common denominator. And I bet you find that it's not their body fat or their income level. It's not their career success or other accomplishments. When you see people that are truly, truly happy, the common denominator is, one way or another, they have found a way to give themselves away. They've learned how to pour themselves out. They have discovered a consistent context for it. And they know that their life is making a meaningful contribution to other lives. And so it really comes down to this. There are two ways of living. I can make it all about me, or I can find a way to pour myself out. Father in heaven, I thank you for the love that you've shown us in Christ. And I thank you for this thing that we have called the church, brothers and sisters. I thank you for the reality that it is more than a service to attend or a building that we go to. It is ultimately, hopefully when it's working right, it's a community that we belong to. It's a family. And God, I pray that you would just continue to build this family. Help us to love one another. Help us to love one another. As we learn to love you, help us to love one another. And then as we love one another, help us to turn that outward and begin to learn to love those outside of ourselves, those in the world around us. God, this is a big deal. And I pray that you help us more and more to learn to get it right. And I pray that you would fill us with you, that we would reflect you. In Jesus' name, amen.